Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and all the participants. Our event will begin shortly. We invite you to come to the ballroom and take your seat. Thank you very much. Once again, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, all the participants. Our event will begin shortly. We invite you to come to the ballroom and take your seat. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera bagi kita semua. Shalom, Om Swastiastu, Namo Buddhaya, Salam Kebajikan. Good evening, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the second talk show of the third pre-summit of Y20 Indonesia 2022, Sustainable and Livable Planet. Please give a round of applause for us today. I'm Bunga Harumdani. On behalf of Y20 and the organizing committee, allow me to convey our sincere gratitude to all of you who have attended today's event on site and virtually. Yesterday, we had an amazing opportunity to talk about safeguarding nature with Ms. Nashin Mahtani, Y20 Indonesian delegate for Sustainable and Livable Planet. It has given us intriguing insight about the vital issues that will be raised in Y20 Summit. And today, we will further observe some more insight that will be just as engaging. As the speakers is going to converse the topic of promoting circular economy. But first, allow me to introduce our moderator. She was an Indonesian delegate to Y20 Russia 2013, Andita Virseli Utami, or known as AFU. AFU is the initiator of Think Policy ID, a community of young professionals with a mission to encourage cross-sector collaboration for more data-driven public policies and empathy. As an environmental economist, he has done various research and analysis on public policies to promote sustainable development in Indonesia. She has a bachelor degree in international relations from the University of Indonesia and a master's degree in public policy from Harvard University. She and her team represented Harvard and won first place in a Global University Challenge competition. She also received the third prize on International UNESCO Essay Contest. Please welcome Ms. Afu.
Over 2 centuries, we have been made to believe that the economy can only grow on a linear model. It looks a little bit like this. We take whatever we need from nature and from the ground, We produce a lot of goods through our manufacturing, agricultural industries. Then we dispose what we stop using or we don't need anymore to the ground. Sometimes it also leaks to the ocean. But today's forward thinkers, many of whom are young people, are starting to question this and ask whether a better model is possible. Today, we know a concept known as the circular economy. Instead of taking whatever we need from the ground and producing excessively, now we start to create designs and models that are very efficient. We allow for materials to be recycled back into the economy, and the little residue that still remains, then we can dispose responsibly and sustainably. I am very proud that tonight we are gathered in the city of Balikpapan, one of the first cities in Indonesia that have actually been implementing this concept. The city has banned single-use plastic bags since 2019, and in the first year of implementation alone, over 50 tons of plastic waste has been reduced. But a big question remains: how do we make circular economy the default? How do we make sure that this is adopted worldwide, not just in Balikpapan or Indonesia? Joining us tonight are 4 distinguished speakers who are going to help us answer some of these questions. And we will focus especially on the question on how we can influence behaviors of individuals, not just as consumers, but also as public and private leaders who can further scale up solutions that can actually mainstream circular economy. The first speaker that will be joining us today and present with us is Dr. Alicia Krit from Center of Competence for Climate, Environment, and Noise Protection, Aviation, Hessen. She is an anthropologist that focuses on consumer behavior and sustainability issues. She has been working with the University College London and the Spanish National Research Council. Alicia, or Dr. Krit, also designed multiple research projects, including the cultural perception, energy, and sustainability and nostalgia, in collaboration with other universities in Germany, Norway, and the US. I love that she also is or has been bringing together scientists, politicians, and business people to make innovation in the sustainable aviation possible. Welcome, Dr. Alicia Krit. The screen is yours.
Well, hello. Thank you so much for the invitation. Hello and greetings from Frankfurt am Main, Germany. My name is Alicia Krit, and I'm an anthropologist. Today, I will share some insights on the underlying dimensions of how to allow for more sustainable consumption. I brought some slides today, so if you may see them too, I think that might be helpful to follow up on the talk. I will talk about 3 dimensions today: why regional matters, how social and cultural dimension should be at the heart of sustainable projects, and how normative infrastructure allow for sustainable consumption. That's the next slide, please. These are the 3 dimensions, so let's have a look. So the first one, the next slide, please. We are living in what my colleague Thomas Eriksson is calling overheated world. And you might have seen one of those charts in that in the last 1,000 years, our accelerated growth of amount of people, a population, have increased immensely. This is your overheated world of immense acceleration of population growth, our demand for food, for shelter, for goods, for travel, and due to immense developments in medicine, electricity, mobile connection, and standardized container shipments, we as a mankind were able to come to where we are now. For all that, we are using huge amount of resources. The Global Footprint Network is calculating every year the so-called World Overshoot Day. And that's the next slide, please. They analyze how much resources we use and how much our planet is being to reproduce in a given year. Currently, we are using 1.7 Earth's worth of resources. Then they calculate how much we have used and mark the day on which we have used the resources of our planet for that given year. And this is your point between the red and the green dot there. This is the average for all countries, but they also calculate it individually. Some countries score better, others not so much. For us here in Germany, we already celebrated our Overshoot Day on the 4th of May this year. Countries like Germany import a lot of resources to make up for an inspired lifestyle: energy, food, labor. The solutions to rethink that catastrophic setup are the sustainability projects. And that's the next slide, please. The sustainable projects like these that I presented here in the panel today are challenging the business as usual and aspire new ways of looking at our planet. I was asked today to talk about the solutions and some examples. The tricky thing is that there is no one single solution for that. It is very circumstantial. To make the solution sustainable for your home environment, you should be more attentive of where such solutions might be implemented. So I brought those 3 principles for making such sustainability consumption projects possible at the perspective of a consumer, if you want. So that is next slide, please. So first of all, it should match the regional geographical conditions. And there are really 2 points in it. There's your obvious point of extra transportation. If you produce something far away, you have to take more energy to transport it back. But there's also another second point that is about building trust with your users about it. I see, for example, it often in innovation. This is the area I've been working on the last couple of years. Next slide, please. We are currently working on the process developing synthetic kerosene for aviation. And the idea is that you don't take carbon out of fossil, you're not fracking it from the earth, but you look what is already out there and try to reuse and repurpose the carbon that surrounds us. And there are different technologies that are being developed right now. Some take it from the air, the CO2, using the direct air capture technology. Others go to wood industry and use the rest of the wood chips for the source of carbon. Others go to food industry and take the used cooking oil as the base for that new kerosene. And this is a great idea because you reuse and recycle what is already out there. You're not digging for new things. The solutions, however, have to fit your geographical conditions. Sustainable aviation fuel in Europe, made from used cooking oil, like from the chips or crisp factories, is great. A lot of the oil for the future projects, however, is planned to be imported from Asia. And this is the point where the trust in the technology starts to crumble. The further away the partners, the production, etc., is, the less transparent the process is, and the customer is likely to less likely to create the trust relationship with you. There are, of course, examples of how some brands and destinations have managed to create a solid reputation. We are, however, talking today about trends. So make sure your solutions fit the geographic reality of your destinations. Create trust and create distinct direct benefits on a long term surrounding you. Local and regional has never been sexier. So next point, please, and the next slide. So the second point is that our solutions have to fit the social hierarchies and value systems of that destination. Well, what can that mean? And next slide, please. I have analyzed a number of energy projects worldwide and found out that a lot of the cases, standard projects that have been implemented without any social scientists following up on how the new technology is going to be used in the given groups. In South Africa, for example, there was an initiative to replace the dangerous paraffin with gas cookers. It's a great idea. Interestingly, men who previously left those areas to the household to women started taking an interest in this new fancy technology. and subsequently overtook that area of household that women previously were in charge of. Women lost the power over those budgets within the families and were pretty unhappy about it. As a result, women switched back to more dangerous paraffin technology, which have previously caused a lot of fires on the first place. My point is that if you want to implement change, you need to see how it fits into the local value systems. Ask them, hear it, and then adjust accordingly. Another example I brought with me today took place here in Germany. There were certain backpacks technology developed to help the workers to heavy lift, for example, suitcase in the airport, and they would help them not to strengthen their back too much. A great idea, right? Well, unfortunately, because of the masculine culture among workers and phrases like, oh, I can't believe you need that already, a lot of those gadgets were abandoned, despite of the fact that could actually prevent a lot of trauma and maintain long-term health for these workers, allowing for sustainable health and employment for these families. Social hierarchies and value systems matter a lot in terms of sustainable consumption processes. And that's the second point. And the next slide, please. We'll go for my third and last point for today. It is about normative infrastructure. What does it mean, actually? Well, when it comes to an individual making certain change, it is difficult. And there are multiple good reasons for that. To start with, our brain does not like change. Any new adjustments means valuable energy wasted. For others, it's about money. These sustainable options are often more expensive. For others, it's about time. You don't always take time to look up for a better option for it. Others don't believe that one woman's actions can change the world, so we leave things the way they are, the way they have been. Of course, there are some pioneers who do take their time and money to find better ways, and I applaud them for that, for their courage and interest and time. Amazing. For the rest of us, well, we are likely to follow the rules that are being set up for us, our family, our school, our university, our company. And that is the so-called normative infrastructure that could and should be changed. Imagine when you demand your school or company to switch on to renewable energy. Then every time you switch on a lamp, you're going to benefit from these conditions. You're not going to question it at the moment in time. Also, to start recycling materials, you cannot do it if there are no proper bins installed for that for you. And the next slide, please. Another example is when you have an event, you can motivate your participants to travel to this event using less harmful modes of transport like trains or boat. And yes, it does sometimes take longer. But what we need is a kind of a change in the traveling culture anyway. Any framing organization can create those conditions to make things different, to make things better. Next slide, please. So changing to sustainability is an exciting journey. What we need to change is culture, a perspective on how things should and can be done. Business as unusual. However, we should remember that there is no one solution. What helps is thinking locally and adjusting how it fits to that regional geographical destination. It all has to fit the social and cultural dimension of the destinations. And finally, it is about creating the normative infrastructure and encouraging your fellow coworkers, customers, and citizens while investing into the framing conditions. Invite them into that different new mindset. What about a tic-tac challenge for that? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Krit. Many of what you have said actually resonates a lot with, I believe, the audience in the room as well. How solutions has to come really from based on local understanding, local wisdom, and in a way decentralized as an approach. So if we have listened from Dr. Krit with maybe coming from academic background, After this, two more speakers will join us. The first one is Joy Danielson. I hope you're already with us. Joy is a partner at Systemic, currently working on the front line in Indonesia to stop 40 million tons of waste from polluting nature each year. She and her team have brought circular waste management to 200,000 people through Project Stop and are on track on bringing waste collection to 5 million people by 2025 with Bersih Indonesia and Banyuwangi Hijau programs. The team also has been supporting policies and private sector funding mechanisms, including plastic and carbon credits to address the root that cause structural constraints behind Indonesia's low waste collection levels. But I believe that she will also be discussing about her recently released book. So the achievement with her team is incredible, but I'd love to hear more as well about the book, which is titled Leave No Trace, Vital Lessons from the Front Line of Waste and Ocean Plastic. Joy, are you with us? Oh yeah, you're already on the screen. Hi, so just to kick off, perhaps you can share with us a little bit your reflections after listening to Dr. Kurt's presentation earlier, and maybe linking that with what G20 countries can do to kind of address some of those challenges or scaling up solutions.
Sure.
The screen is yours.
Thank you so much. It's such an honor to be here. And I love how you opened this and said a better world is possible. And we know that that's true. So I have a team of about 50 people who are very committed to stopping pollution in nature. We're working very hard in right now 4 different cities to really try to change the underlying root cause constraints behind Indonesia's low collection levels. Indonesia is not alone. We've got over 2 billion people worldwide who do not have access to any type of waste collection. And so all of that waste is going into the environment to pollute nature. So I guess your question was, what should G20 countries do to promote circular economy, and sort of a reflection on Elisa's points. On the G20 side, there's a tremendous amount of power that nations have to ensure a circular economy is possible. So this starts from, I think, the very beginning, which is how governments actually invest in waste services. Do they invest in traditional linear, collect the waste and go straight to landfill, or do they actually provide more expensive, more complex, more time-intensive circular waste systems where the waste is collected, sorted, processed, and only what can't be processed more then goes to landfill. They can also, or they are also in charge of the regulation that standardizes the types of plastic materials that can be used, as well as the formats that can be used. They can introduce things like extended producer responsibility, which brings private sector funding into the waste collection and waste recycling services. And they can give tax breaks and subsidies to players that are working in this space and actually trying to create the foundation for an investable sort of entrepreneurial waste system. So there's a tremendous amount that they can do, but fundamentally, we have to fix the economics before circular, any type of, let's say, circular systems are possible. And I'm most familiar with, the waste and recycling system. And right now, recycling is only financially viable for a small portion of materials, and that's things like PET, like your plastic bottles and your other sort of rigid plastics. But the majority of plastics and other sort of waste materials that aren't necessarily classified, like diapers and things like that, have no or very little value, and it actually costs us more to sort them than the value you get from selling them, if there is even a market. And so until that changes, a circular economy is not really possible. And to do that, we really need to work on the economics, and that includes addressing buyer demand. So that more materials can be bought, and they can be bought at prices that actually make the system work. And that includes standardizing the quality of the supply. It also includes, again, standardizing the composition and formats of the materials, investing in R&D so that and piloting so more materials can be recycled using new technology, and just making sure that waste systems are efficient, robust, sustainable, etc.
That sounds like a really long and intimidating list of things to do for the government. I do agree that I think at its core, we need to fix the economics of it. We need to make it viable for a more efficient and circular model to be adopted. But where should we start? And maybe talk a little bit about what you wrote in your book. How should we be thinking about this so that it doesn't seem like a big, overwhelming task at hand?
That's a good question.
Do you touch on this in your book?
So the book is about the most fundamental challenges for making, let's say, localized waste systems possible. And that includes things like behavior change, waste picker integration, processing organics without a loss, recycling hard to recycle plastics, these types of concepts, a lot of what I've just talked about before. But I think we have to start when we're really talking about a circular economy. I think we need to start even before that and really look at consumption, right? And I'm going to get a little bit philosophical here, and because I had a really interesting conversation recently with a friend of mine, and we were talking about consumption, and his theory was that we as humanity, we have fear of scarcity, right? We have a fear that we won't have enough money, we won't have enough food, we won't have enough goods, we won't, I mean, even more sort of tangential things like we won't have enough love, respect, and that sort of thing. And so we have this tendency of hoarding, and we buy, and we buy more than we actually need. And we've built this entire economy on consumption, right? And the more goods that are sold, the better GDP that we have, the better the stock market does, all of these things, right? So our entire system is resting on this concept of overconsumption. And Lisa said we're at 1.7 times the Earth's resources. And so what my friend was saying, and I thought this was really interesting, and I actually had a talk with Sano about this a few days ago, but if we can actually help people feel more secure that what they have is enough and that they themselves are enough, then we can start helping people to only consume what they need, and we can start breaking that cycle of consumption. And I think we, in conferences and in our work, we look at a lot of the technical sides of things. How do we set up recycling systems so that these things can be circular? But I think even before that, we need to think about the consumption side of things, and whatever we consume eventually becomes waste. And I think when we talk about waste, we're talking about throwing things away, and we think that this concept of away, right? This concept of away is like it's separate from us, and so we it doesn't exist anymore. But what just happens is that we can't see it, right? We don't know that it's just being taken from one place, which is close to us, to a different place. And in the concept of plastics, it doesn't biodegrade, it just microdegrades, and these pieces get smaller and smaller. And so we end up actually breathing in plastic particles. We end up drinking them in our water sources, right? And these can get so small that they can actually cross the blood-brain barrier. And so there's a lot of research on what this means for our health and for, other life forms' health. So I guess there's a few parts to this. So one is we really have to, I think, address the underlying need that we have against scarcity, so that we only consume what we need, and then we really need to figure out how to address this concept of away, like throwing things away, that it doesn't actually go anywhere, right? It's just moved, but it doesn't disappear.
this philosophical question is so critical, and I think in a lot of forums like this, speakers tend to be apologetic when they ask this question. You know, can we revisit our concept of enough? You know, really asking that fundamental question. But I do think that is the one like big question. How do we define enough and make people feel more secure, as you said, about you know what they already have and really consuming at the level that's necessary. I think a lot of people are scared of asking this question because they think that the entire economic system will crumble. But I do think that this means that we need to rethink about how we built our economic system in the first place. Whether we should be obsessed about growth the way that we're defining growth today, or whether we should redefine what growth looks like. We will revisit this question again, but I'll for now move to our next speaker. So we're also joined by Kay Wang, the program lead from Platform for Accelerating Circular Economy, or PACE. I hope you're already here. So we have heard from, hi there. Oh, all the speakers are female. Oh, we'll have one more male speaker after this. So Kay leads PACE's program team to build cross-sectoral collaborations and drive actions at scale. She has overseen the development of the Circular Economy Action Agenda. Prior to this, Kay also had over 10 years of experience leading research and innovation teams across public, private, and civil society sectors. She has a PhD in applied physics from Stanford University and executive MBA from Rotterdam School of Management. Very impressive. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. Perhaps you can share with us, your reflections from what has been shared earlier in the presentation, as well as remarks from Joy. The screen is yours.
Sure. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much for having me here. Being an Asian living in Europe, working on circular economy, I'm quite used to attending CE events, and most of them are led by European countries. So today it is really exciting for me to be talking about circular economy at a major event hosted by an Asian country. So I resonate with pretty much everything the previous speakers have said. So I'm kind of rethinking what else should I add to that, right? So talking about main challenges in promoting and implementing a circular economy, PACE, we actually looked into this for several value chains. A couple of years ago, plastics, electronics, textiles, et cetera, and we found great similarities across the different value chains. And one of them is actually what Alessia has already emphasized, right? Behavior change. So circular economy requires us as consumers to keep using our stuff for longer. Our clothes, our mobile phones. It requires us to switch from using single-use plastics to reusables. It requires us to start sorting our waste and bring them back for recycling. But actually, if you think about this, these are not groundbreaking new behavior, right? Our parents or grandparents, they've been doing this all the time. That was a normative back then. And even today, many people from maybe the lower income areas are still doing that every day. So it is some of us, or many of us, who have actually forgotten how to do that. So the question is, how can we bring back those behavior again? Now we have become wealthier and we can afford the abundant, convenient, and wasteful lifestyle, right? And I think Alessia already gave quite some answers to how that may be possible. And I think one way to get there is, as Joy has pointed out, we need to make circular economy a more logical choice, economically more logical choice, and a logistically more logical choice. And it's not the case today, right? So circular economy still lacks financial economic case for companies. Otherwise, we won't need us, NGOs, governments, promote it. People will just start doing it by themselves. But because the money side is not working yet, as Joy pointed out, right, the economics are not working yet. So we cannot expect companies to just do it by themselves, right? It's not a reasonable ask. So companies do need policy stimulation or policy support from the government. But now then we look at the government, and what we see is there's also overall a lack of enabling policy environment for circular economy. And why is that? Because governments also have their own priorities, right? For global South governments, it's most of the time it's about economic development. For global North government, they tend to have a bit more capacity to think about ecological challenges. And right now, climate change, that's a priority. So we need to understand better, we need stronger evidence on how circular economy can contribute to these policy priorities, economic development and climate change. And while our understanding has been advancing over the past years, it is still not enough, right? The great question the facilitator asked, a very sharp question, is whether we can keep improving our living standards without keep increasing production and consumption and using more stuff and more materials. And that question still remains unanswered. And I think another part of the question is, this is a Y20 event. So how can G20 countries help to promote such a transition? I think each G20 country is different, right? So there's not a one-cut recipe. And on the other hand, the G20 countries are such large economies. So even a small step forward in each country can really accumulate to impact of huge scale. And there are a lot of things that countries can do domestically, as Joy has already illustrated. And as a facilitator said, circular economy is a systematic change. So the list is very long. There's so much to do, and where can we get started, right? I've been thinking about it when you asked that question. I'm not sure if there's already a cooking recipe, right? If we start with this, followed with that, and in the end, we get circular economy. But I would think it's always easier to start playing according to existing rules, right? So our existing rule of the game in today's world is market economy. And if anything works under market economy, that's the easiest way to start scaling them. But as mentioned earlier, circular products, services are not market competitive often. And that's largely because the supply chain is still much less developed compared to the linear economy. It is more expensive, it is less reliable. And here is where governments can help, right? Because governments are large buyers. They have the power to change that picture, change that balance. If governments start to include circularity in their public procurement guidelines, it can create powerful market demand and can pull the circular supply chains to scale up quickly and to become more competitive. But domestic measures are still not enough. We also need international collaborations. And why? Think about climate again, right? We talk a lot about energy in the climate change mitigation. But do you know actually about half of world's greenhouse gas emissions actually come from materials? And the circular economy can help address that half of emissions. It can cut material footprint, can cut carbon footprint in the value chain. But that goes beyond country borders, right? Because the supply chain is global. So what European countries, North American countries do might lead to greenhouse gas savings in Asia and in Latin America. That's why the G20 countries need to work together on international mechanisms that can help to encourage this kind of footprint reduction across borders. If we're all very much focused on what happens within our own borders, we'll be missing big opportunities. And last point, quickly, it's also about raising public awareness, right? So people, common people, like our families, our friends, our neighbors, they need to understand what is circular economy and why we need that. Why is that important? Because we need that not just for behavioral change, we also need that for policy change. Our politicians listen to their people. But public awareness level on circular economy is still very, very low. And here's what I think the youth in the audience can play a huge role, right? The younger generation has already demonstrated to be pivotal in raising awareness, public awareness on climate change. And it's also very encouraging to see a rising number of youth leaders promoting circular economy. Indonesia has its own rising stars. And I'm also very excited to see my kids start talking to us, talking to me about climate, about circularity. They learn that from school. So those are really, really encouraging trends. And yeah, the future of the world always belong to the youth, right? Thank you.
Thank you so much. Very, very critical reflections. I hope you can hear the claps coming from the audience. Just maybe one short follow-up. I like what you said about how at the end of the day, change is about the people and people's awareness. I've always wondered, because with PACE, you've been working with different stakeholders through cross-sectoral collaboration. So you've been working with not only government, private sector, but also civil society actors who are also individuals at the end of the day. Is there any significant shift in terms of mindset and attitude and behavior of these people you've been engaging with as individuals that you think also have been enabling for this type of solutions coming from the places that they work? For example, if they're like policy solutions, business solutions, and other types of solutions.
Great question indeed. PACE is a global high-level leadership platform, right? So we have really high-level leaders from governance, business, NGOs, and we bring them together to develop collective agenda, common goals, and then also collaborative actions. So are there fundamental shifts, or is it more incremental? I guess there are always more incremental change than fundamental shifts. But we do see from now and then, there are fundamental shifts, or at least drivers that might lead to fundamental shifts, right? So at the policy level, March 2022 is a very important moment for circular economy. The UN started negotiations towards a global plastic treaty. The European Commission has adopted policy package on circular economy that looks not just at the end of the pipe, but really at the design phase, at consumer information, empowerment, et cetera, et cetera. And I think talking about your point, saying, okay, our stakeholders are also individuals. So indeed, like they are in their private life, they are individuals, right? So are they actually really living the talk, walking the talk in their private lives? That's one question. And in their professional life, I think that also brings us a bit to the question of metrics, right? So how, like we might have people who are personally passionate about change, but how can organizations be designed to really reflect, to really encourage and turn those personal interests and ambition into organizational change? I think that's a very different question compared to people's behavior in their private lives.
Such a great point. I think this point is really important, because sometimes even when the individuals have shifted incrementally or otherwise, their behaviors, their attitude towards the issue, if the organization doesn't allow for this new ideas and changes to be facilitated, then yeah, it will likely go into or doesn't manifest into actual change. Thank you so much, Kay. We will move on to the next speaker, the final one, who's also a good friend of mine. We have here Muhammad Bijaksana Junerosano, or fondly called as Masano, who is the Managing Director and founder of Waste for Change. Masano is the founder of Greeneration Indonesia Group, a social enterprise that promotes eco-friendly lifestyles. Founded in 2006, Greeneration started out as a passion project aiming to encourage the nation to implement sustainable consumption and production. And he is the managing director and founder of Waste for Change and founder of Greeneration Foundation. We have already mentioned that. He is part of many other movements on promoting circular economy, including Indonesia Bersih and Bebas Sampah. He's also the co-initiator and core team of Forum Bandung Juara Bebas Sampah, advisor of World Cleanup Day Indonesia, bebassampah.id, and many. It's a very long list of campaigns and initiatives that he's been a part of. So it's such a great opportunity that we will be able to tap into his wisdom and experience. Mas Ano, apa kabar?
Baik, baik, Afu.
Semoga sehat-sehat.
Insya Allah sehat.
Yeah, so we have been discussing a lot. We've been listening to the previous speakers, Alicia, Kay, and Joy. They have shared what they think is the main challenge and their own reflections in terms of how we should move forward. So Masano, a very open-ended question. Where do you think we should focus our attention to? Where's the remaining challenge that we need to really hammer down? Silakan, Mas.
Yeah, thank you very much. I believe there is a clear message that we already have the solution towards circular economy on the technological level or in the technical solution level. So it's not a problem to implement circular economy at all. We can implement it. Yeah, we already have the technology, we already have the solution, we already have any agenda, roadmap, and everything. It's similar like every environmental target about climate and everything. I believe we already have the solution. So we need to ask deeper on that. It's like Einstein said that we cannot solve a problem in the level that in the same thinking we use when we created them. So I believe we need to dig deeper why that is very hard to implement the solution that we already know about solving environmental, climate, even circular economy. I believe we also, I like your statement, Afu. I think it's similar like Mr. Gandhi said. The world has enough for everyone needs. We have enough world for everyone needs, but not enough for everyone greeds. So we need to think deeper about this. The way we live, the way we think, the way we create our country, our world, our global population. Currently, I already checked, our population already reached 7.9 billion. So it's also amazed me. We are near 8 billion population. I read an article that if we want to change something without a war, without revolution, we need to convince 4% of the population to do something that we want to change. So we need to ask, is it in our own country, in this G20 country, do we already convince 4% of our population to create the change that we want to have? Yeah, it's not easy to convince in Indonesia. It means we need to convince 10 million people about circular economy, pushing this agenda, go into the political agenda, go into the government and everything. Do we already have enough people on this to convince 10 million people on the same direction? Sometimes I already have around 17 experience, 17 years experience to work in environmental. Sometimes I also have this hopelessness. Sometimes I feel hitting a big wall. It's like this week talking with Joy, we already work, but the speed of the solution still slower than the speed of the environmental destruction. So we need to think more clear about how we can create and also push the solution more faster, yeah, speed up the solution. But the most important thing is, I know that we need to very confident and also optimistic that we can change this if we have enough collaboration and also enough people that like this G20 platform. I believe this is everyone have the same passion, have the same vision to achieve something good for our society. So we need to have a stronger collaboration and partnership because it's not easy task to do. It's a very complex things to solve. So I believe let's start now and work together. Thank you.
Very important reflections. Gandhi said we have enough for everyone's need, but not for everyone's greed. I feel like that's a very deep reflection that we need to start thinking together. And Masano highlighted earlier that it only takes 3.5% of the population, but still we require 10 million people at least to care about this topic. And slowly we're going there. Masano, on this hopelessness that you're experiencing. I've also been on this issue for maybe 8, 9 years, and I think I share this frustration. I don't know if many people in the room also feel this way. But what keeps you going then? How with Waste for Change and all these other things, what keeps you going, Mas?
Because that's something right to do, Afu. I'm a Muslim, and in my religion, Muhammad, our prophet, said, if you know that tomorrow is a doomsday or the end of the world, and in your hand you have a seed of tree, plant it. So it means it's not about the end result, but it's about our effort. The way we see that we have something good in our hand and we want to do something good and we want to create the change. In fact, that's the message that we need to do. It's very difficult to solve waste. In fact, yeah, sorry to say, if we are talking about waste, in my mind, in my experience, I can solve it. Me personally, I can solve it. But I cannot work alone because the society involving government, involving private sector, involving social, and we have still problem in government. Yeah, Indonesia, we still have a lot of problem. In society, we also have still a lot of, we need maturity in our society, become differentiation on opinion and everything. So for me, the message is, if you have something good in your mind, in your hand, just keep doing it. Thank you.
So much passion. Yes, please. I would like to invite everyone to give their round of applause. Thank you so much, Masano, for sharing with us. I will come back to you, but now we'll go back to Alicia. I hope you're still with us. Many has been said, Alicia, on your presentation. Each speakers previously, Joy, Kay, and Masano have shared their own experience in trying to affect change, both at the systemic level and in terms of behavioral change. Do you have any response, general reflection on what has been said?
Yes, well, thank you for all those insights. And it does reflect the experiences that I'm having when I'm bringing different partners together to play on different projects and to collaborate together. Because they're usually the people who are talking about the technical sides of things, which is super important, say what is the most energy efficient way of doing things. Then there are people who are usually talking about economical notions of it and checking how does it play into the profitability of companies, how they're just viable, how they can keep on going. Then there's the legal people who are coming in and saying, well, what does it stay in the regulations? And this is the important, I think, that Kim mentioned on the different public policies that are important in a way. You know, what are the penalties? What are the penalties for me to actually contribute to that more innovative way of doing things, or of actually just to pay a penalty and get away with it, so to speak, and do business as usual. So what often comes as a surprise is then people and the potential users are not sufficiently informed about the solutions, about their benefits, and they're not likely going to support it. And that's the point that I've mentioned before. If the governments think on every level, also on local level, that their voters don't need that, they're likely not going to implement those projects. So the idea that you communicate with the general public and create discussion about these solutions, I think it will massively help elevate trust and support in those initiatives. And maybe another point that you mentioned, are there any shifts? I must say in my work, I have noticed definitely a shift. And this is the point where United Nations development goals actually play a role. Back in the time, I was working in a different area, so I heard some critical notions that, yeah, that's just a general thing that was signed up for and nobody really interested in it. Now, when I'm actually in the midst of those projects happening, these goals and these Paris Agreement goals are actually very important measures for a lot of companies, for a lot of governments, and they're measuring their performance based on the goals and strategies that are set up for it. That's pretty new. I've had a pleasure to work with two IPCC authors in Norway once, and now the IPCC reports are being published worldwide, and organizations who are not included into the normal regulatory talks also start talking about things. So there is a certain development into understanding how vital those topics are. And in terms of young people shift here in Europe, we do notice with the such movements like Fridays for Future that the interest is there, that there is a Scientists for Future, there are Parents for Future, there are many different organizations happening and putting more pressure in it. What it also always or often comes to is the price. A colleague of mine have been doing an interview of people who are, of young people who are traveling, the generation X, Y, and Z, I think, and the younger one are caring a lot about this project, but not always ready to pay for it. So there's always this kind of cost margin for it, I guess. So yeah, the change is happening, and the pace is there. What I might add also is that it's for different country. I think it might be different types of motors that are functioning and working, because on an international level, interestingly, the word sustainability or the idea of what sustainability is has different dimensions. In some countries, it's about the understanding of how much impact your actions have and trying to contribute towards reducing that impact on a global scale. For other countries that are perhaps still developing and still can afford to throw away the packaging of a cookie while eating it because they could never do it in the last 30 years. For some people, for those communities, a lot of the cases, the notion of sustainability is understanding it through yourself, how you're affecting yourself through that. And then if there are topics like microplastic pollutions comes up, the people are likely to be motivated not to use this single-use plastics, for example, and throw them away and use them or try to recycle it or combust it somehow, because it can influence their own health. And to prevent that, they might want to sign up for that more sustainable projects or products or services that are out there. So I just wanted to highlight that the motivations among different countries is different, but also support the idea of previous speakers that we need to speak internationally because these topics are overarching and there is really, we can't solve it on our own. So thank you very much for keeping that discussion and conversations going on the Y20. It's so exciting.
Thank you, Alicia. Thank you so much. I think this point you brought in terms of how companies have started to measure their impacts as informed by the SDGs or others like sustainability targets is important. But at the same time, I also wonder that sometimes some companies or institutions can get distracted with the measuring of the little interventions that they have done instead of actually enabling change more systematically. Like I see that a lot of investment go into measuring what little things that they've done, maybe in a way that they should invest more in the actual change. Just a little observation that some of the speakers might or might not agree. Now we are opening the opportunity for the audience here, delegates as well as participants who might have questions to ask to our distinguished speakers. I see a few hands already being raised. A very packed room, by the way, for the four speakers. If you can see the room, I don't know if you have access to actually see the room. It's very packed. We have one over here. Is there any other questions? Just to kind of line up a few questions at the same time. No. Okay. Let's start with the first one.
Hi everyone. My name is Saka, and I'm a medical student. I would like to ask a question, can be answered by anyone who is interested. So my question is, if you want to shift a system, you have to shift the people instead of the system, right? Shifting people means shifting the paradigm of their thinking. And it has been previously explained that changing is about changing people, right? But the problem in developing countries is that people don't have time to be aware, you know? Some people have to continuously work 13 hours a day only to fulfill their basic needs, you know? So let alone reading heavy statistic about the impact of climate change, these people doesn't even have high reading comprehension, right? So my question is, how can we ever reach this layer of society? What is the right approach that we have to use to reach this layer of society? Because, you know, digital campaign doesn't seem to be effective for these people because education contents are not the contents they're exposed to in social media, right? So if you want to do a digital campaign, it doesn't really have an effective effect for these people, right? At the end of the day. So my question is, what is the right approach that we have to use? Thank you very much.
Excellent, excellent, excellent question. A very difficult one as well. I wonder who amongst our speakers would like to take the first stab at this question? Yes, Joy, screen's yours.
Sure. I'd like to raise it up a little bit because when we're talking about systems change, you can start at the bottom and work towards 3.5 to 4%. You can also start at the top, and I think the way that we're thinking about systems change of at least the waste and recycling system, it goes through a series of steps, and I'll kind of explain what we're doing. So first, generally what happens is you see a lot of global and sometimes national reports, right? And they talk about the level of urgency, why something's important, what needs to be done. Usually there's financial models and such that are attached to that, which shows different options and different scenarios. And that just gives everyone, let's say, a map to focus on, but not necessarily the how. And usually what happens next is you have smaller pilots. And those pilots then work, for the waste and sort of circular system, it might be like a community of 100,000 people to just kind of test different things like governance and technology and behavior change campaigns and all of this. And when you actually do pilots, you learn what the actual barriers are. You might have thought they were certain things when you're at the sort of desk-based research doing the policy work. But when you actually do, you find out really what's important because you have to break through it in order to be successful. So then you take that knowledge of what the real barriers are and you start building collaborations, right? And you find who in government cares about various barriers. You find who in civil society, who in various associations, other nonprofits, other social enterprises, even funders, who cares about what, right? And you start building momentum around those barriers, and you start doing focus groups to, you might have an idea of what it takes to solve that, like let's say bringing enough funding into the waste system, right? You might have ideas on that, but by actually bringing a lot of people together to debate it, then you start getting a solution that is well tested, is more robust, and has the ownership that it needs to move through the government system. Once you kind of have more of that buy-in, you can actually go from these small pilots to much larger pilots. So for us, for example, we started in cities of 100 and 150,000 people like Kachamatans. Now we're doing full regencies up to 2.6 million people. And that, because we're working at a scale and we're bringing so much money into those cities, we can convince the local governments of those cities to trial very innovative concepts in the technology and the governance and the funding cycles, like retribution fees, all of that kind of stuff that we might not have had the credibility and enough incentive to get them to try before that. And then once you show what's possible at a larger scale, then that starts convincing both the policymakers as well as other cities that change is possible and that there's actually more effective ways of doing things. And along that path, we also work on various policy changes. And then you get to a really interesting point, which is, I think, a sticking point for, let's say, any sort of environmental challenge is you might have successful pilots and you can move those successful pilots from, let's say, small scale to like medium scale, but to go national, you generally have to change the way that funding works. And that has to be both on an OPEX and a CAPEX level. So you have to move from philanthropic funding to investable, in this case, waste and recycling systems. And so then you look at really innovative blended finance models and that sort of thing. So that's, that's how we think of systems change from a waste and recycling perspective. And I hope that's helpful.
Thanks, Joy. It is helpful. I already see Masano's hand up. So maybe without further ado, silakan Mas.
Saka from medical study, aim for the head. For me, if we can change the head to turn to the right, all the movement will change also to the right. So always aim to the head, because it's like also our body. All our body movement is because of the brain. So if we want to change the society, we need to see where is the brain of the society. So see the leaders, see the system work, and work on it. If we work too much on the too much level, I believe it's very hard. So it's like David and Goliath. Why David is winning fighting with the Goliath? Because aiming to the head. So if we want to change the society, let's aim to our leader. We need to change our leadership. We need to change how our leader creating the system. Because if the system works in Indonesia, why people using helm? Why people using the seat belt? Because the system already make us to use the helm and to use the seat belt, because it's mandatory and there is law enforcement for it. And how about it? Because the leader want that make happen. So if we are talking about environmental, if we are talking about everything, let's do this, including in the small community. Let's talk with the head. Let's talk with the leader. I think that's very simple suggestion or ideation. Thank you.
Thanks, Masano. I think both, yes, Kay, I see you. Both Joy and Masano are highlighting the importance also of like a top-down approach, basically, in implementing solutions. I think Joy earlier highlighted basically this like piloting approach is in a way mitigating the risk for those policymakers or decision makers in transitioning to change, right? Because it's always scary to go into the unknown, but once you've shown at a smaller scale level solution is possible, it makes sense, then the head will also doubt less in changing the direction, and that way the rest of the body, as Masano said, will follow. Now, Kate, do you agree with this, or you have a different kind of reflection? Please come in.
I agree with that. I just want to add two very quick points. I think it's a good question, but I don't think it only applies to this layer of the society, right? It's not just people who don't have the time or education level to think and understand about circular economy. I think that this challenge applies to all of us, even though those of us who are working on this every day. It does not mean we always have the time and the knowledge to make the best consumption choice. So that applies to all of us. And personally, I don't think we can rely on converting people, right? It might work, but it will take an awfully long time. I think we have to make sustainable choices, logical choice for people, right? So people who don't understand, don't have the time and knowledge to understand what that is, will simply choose it because it's most logical, most convenient, yeah, the best choice.
Totally agree. Yes, Alicia, please.
I think I would just like to also to say that I see definitely a good point in terms of local leaders, how they are the key people to transform the different societies, and because sustainability and those projects we've been talking about have a lot of different benefits, and those benefits play to different society groups differently. It may affect how your yields from your fruit crops work. It may affect how your school system work. It might affect how your tourism in your local community works. And we do need those individuals who are leaders in the certain groups, like directors of schools or religious leaders, or your local companies who are able to translate those benefits to the local groups and create kind of a projects or normativity around it. So it's normal that if a new energy source is being built up, it's going to be, I don't know, a windmill or something. So I think I definitely agree that there's in the life of a person working and bringing kids to school or going to study or to work, it's, you know, the information you're not able to get and analyze the IPCC report. What is it, 400 pages? But indeed, when it's being translated to the local needs and having the power to change the certain norms, the certain normalities, I think that's, you know, is actually the key to that changes.
Yes, certainly. Mas, siapa tadi namanya Mas? Saka. Yes, Mas Saka, I hope that has answered your question. I think this last part especially is important. I think the speakers agree that we're not in the business of converting everyone per se or making everyone understand the IPCC report or everything about circular economy, but enough that it creates some kind of momentum for change to happen, especially top down in a way, or systemic level change from policy and business leaders. Do you agree? You have a response?
I do agree with that. Okay.
Okay, 1 minute.
I do agree.
Oh, you agree? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Maybe one round of applause for the speakers and the question. We can take one more question if there is any from the audience or maybe from our participants on Zoom. We have 10 minutes for one more, maybe or two question if there is any. I see a hand up at the back, or maybe that person was just stretching. Okay. Is there any question from the Zoom room? No. Okay. All right. In that case, we will use this final. I think everyone is just agreeing with everything that has been said. That's why they don't have any questions. But maybe just one final round robin for everyone with this one question of then, you know, as the young people in this room get out of this door, you know, what are the one main thing they need to remember and they can do right after they step out of the room? Who wants to start? Feel free to take a little longer. You have 2 minutes, around 2 minutes to answer this question. All right. Maybe I should. Okay. Thanks for volunteering, Alicia.
Well, I cannot, I think, stress enough the importance of communication and talking. This is the point where no matter how exciting things that you're doing, if you're not communicating them often in different ways to different people, no one's going to find out about them. So I'd like to encourage you maybe to get out of your comfort zone and talk to people who do not share same views as you are, and because I think it's in the dialogue that the truth is born. So I'd like to encourage you to stay true to your ideas and to what you think is important and talk about it. Thank you.
Such a great tip. And I'm happy to report that actually in between the sessions, you see the young people here have been connecting and networking and kind of sharing their ideas and initiatives. I talk already to maybe 3 or 5 different people with different ideas, and that has been rewarding. So can't agree more. And maybe, you know, use our social media, right, to further amplify those messages. So communications, who's next? Yes, Kate, please.
I can go next. I think my message would be about action, and in particular, what can I do, right? So each one of you, what can I do? I think circular economy, there has been a lot of talking. We continue to need talking. I contribute to talking as well, but there are not enough actions. And there has also been a lot of what others need to do, right? The governments need to move first. Companies need to move first. There hasn't been enough about the mentality of starting from myself, starting from ourselves. So that would be my message. Thank you.
Thank you. So start the action, less talking and more walking the talk. I think we can certainly take that home with us and reflect and do better. Who's next? Yes, Joy.
Great, thanks. I guess I just want to start by saying everyone in this room and on the Zoom, we all have far more power than we really realize that we do, right? I think we all know that we can live in more sustainable ways and we can make more responsible buying choices. And I think that's a good place to start. But you also have a lot of influence in other ways as well. And I think the social media side was highlighted. I have never seen government or companies move faster than when certain types of social media come out that exposes truth that's uncomfortable. So, you know, you can definitely, if that's something that speaks to you and something that inspires you, I'd definitely say that. There's so many places to volunteer. I also think, you know, when you're thinking about choices of where to work, right? It's a really important decision because that's where you're spending so much of your time and so much of your energy and so much of your thinking. And if you can get jobs at places that you can work from within and really try to change, you know, the buying policies, the way plastics are used or the materials choices at all, you know, these are things that you can do that really make a difference in the world and in this space. So just realize how much power you do have. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I do think sometimes young people may discount the real influence and power that they have, or kind of feeling not confident that we can affect change. But I think there's definitely more power in us than we realize, and there is especially power in numbers. I think this whole Y20 roadshow has shown and has engaged a lot of young people with their ideas. I think, yeah, if we can get organized and get all these different ideas, cross-pollinate and collaborate, more great things can happen. Masano is back here.
Yeah.
Please, Masano, your final remarks.
Invest in our
the
Earth.
connection.
That's the
Okay.
message of our update this year. Can you hear me, Afu?
Yes, you're back now. You were disconnected a bit earlier. Can
Hello?
you start over, maybe?
Yeah. Let's invest in our Earth. That's the message of Earth Day this year. I believe this is really needed. One of big problem to shifting this environment to be more sustainable or circular economy is the financing gap. And the financing gap is very huge. So we need to invest more in our Earth. I encourage you to become more green entrepreneur or invest into the green entrepreneur, or even you donate into the movement that pushing the agenda of sustainability. In fact, maybe $1 a month, whatsoever, but it's really important to invest in our Earth. Thank you.
Invest in our Earth. I would like to invite everyone for a very huge round of applause for all the 4 speakers that have joined us tonight. If I may maybe share my own 3 takeaways from the discussion. First, I think I really like how we started off with Dr. Kurt's presentation in terms of how we should think locally. So oftentimes we think really far away, what are these like global technological solutions, but oftentimes solutions are about going back to our roots, going back to the local wisdoms that already exist here in Balikpapan, here in Indonesia, and everywhere where the solutions are being born. Secondly, is that bottom-up awareness as well as top-down solutions have to come together in parallel. So yes, we do need to change or influence the policy, the political and business leaders to start investing in Earth and making big systemic changes. At the same time, while we're also raising awareness from more and more people, bottom-up style, hopefully we can get to the 3.5% threshold number, 10 million people in Indonesia starting to care more about this issue and affecting change. And finally, every single one of us has power. And step out of the room, hopefully feeling a little bit more inspired. Masano has shared with us earlier how simply we have to do this because this is the right thing to do. It might seem hopeless at times, but change is happening, and all of us is an important part of that change. Thank you so much to all the 4 speakers. Thank you to all audience that has been joining us tonight. I will give the floor back to the MC. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Afu, for insightful talk show. Kita berikan tepuk tangan sekali lagi. Mohon berkenan untuk tetap di tempat. Please stay on your position on the screen. Ms. Afu and all the speaker, we're gonna take a photo ops. On my mark, 3, 2, 1. Once more, 3, 2, 1. Thank you, Ms. Afu, Ms. Huang, Ms. Joy Danielson, Mr. Sano, and Ms. Alicia Craig. Have a pleasant day. Ladies and gentlemen, we have gained some fruitful insight on the topic. And even though it seems like we still have a lot to accomplish, today's talk show have been a good start to a more conducive and effective discussion in the future. Therefore, on behalf of the Y20 co-chair and the organizing committee of Indonesian Youth Diplomacy, we thank you all for attending the second talk show of the third pre-summit of Y20 Indonesia 2022 Sustainable and Livable Planet. It has been a wonderful and productive night. I'm Bunga Harumdani signing off. Thank you. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening.